One Sunday afternoon in the late summer of 1968 in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was living at the time, I began to think of all the trouble that had plagued America and the world during the turbulent 60s. As I pondered, my thoughts turned to my Bible and I picked it up from the table. I looked down and found that I had opened it to 1 Kings, the story of King Solomon, who had once ruled a kingdom similar to America today. As I started to read, a vision suddenly appeared in my mind. I saw the names of 6 cities: New Orleans, Los Angeles, Memphis, Birmingham, Dallas, Atlanta. And slowly, in the eyes of my mind, I saw all but the first letters in each of the words fade away. Left standing, the first letters of each city spelled the words number lambda. Number lambda, the 11th letter of the Greek alphabet. Then in my vision I saw 3 names: President John F. Kennedy, Dr. Martin Luther King, Senator Robert F. Kennedy. I remembered then that the 6 cities, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Memphis, Birmingham, Dallas, and Atlanta, had all played a part in the lives and deaths of these American leaders. Senator Kennedy had been killed in Los Angeles. Dr. King had been killed in Memphis, had achieved his greatest fame in his letter from a Birmingham jail, and had headquartered his nonviolence crusade in Atlanta. President Kennedy had been killed in Dallas by Lee Harvey Oswald, who had plotted the assassination in New Orleans. Each of these 3 leaders' last name begins with the letter K. The letter K is the 11th letter of both the English and Hebrew alphabet. The Hebrew K or Kaf means in the palm of his hands. President Kennedy had been assassinated on November the 22nd, 1963, November the 11th month. Dr. King had been killed on April 4, 1968 at 6:05 p.m. 6 and 5 is 11. Senator Kennedy had been killed on June 5, 1968. June, the 6th month, 5th day. 6 and 5 is 11. At this point, while I found these revelations rather startling, I put them aside in my mind. Then, in the late autumn of 1973, on the Mississippi Gulf Coast of the United States, I experienced a strange encounter, which resulted in my receiving a message from aliens from another world, which I subsequently revealed in a previous recording entitled The UFO Message. After I had received the UFO message, I began to seriously meditate and to study the strange parallels of history now unfolding in the world. In meditating on world events, I again thought of the Kennedys and Dr. King's assassinations. In so doing, I suddenly saw a World War I battlefield. This had been the war that was supposed to end all wars. World War I had ended on November the 11th, 1918 at exactly 11 a.m., the 11th month, the 11th day, the 11th hour. Then I saw the word Watergate. Watergate, the word which has come to cast the greatest shame this country has ever known. And then I remembered that President Richard M. Nixon was the 11th man to have been vice president and then become president of the United States. When President Nixon resigned, Gerald Ford became the 38th president of the United States. 3 and 8 is 11. Then I saw the zodiac sign for water, Aquarius. We are now in the age of Aquarius, the 11th house of the zodiac. Suddenly, in the watery vision, I saw a boat sinking slowly beneath the sea. President Kennedy's PT boat had been sunk during World War II, and he and 10 of his men had been saved, 11 in all. President Kennedy's boat had been sunk in the Solomon Islands. I then remembered back to 1968 when I had first thought of the number 11 vision and had been reading in Kings 1. I checked my Bible and found that Kings 1, the story of King Solomon, is the 11th book of the Bible. There are 11 letters in the 2 words King Solomon. Solomon's greatest glory had been his temple dedicated to God. The temple was begun in Solomon's 4th year as king. It took 7 years to complete. 4 and 7 is 11. At the entrance to the temple were 2 great pillars forming the number 11. The pillars were made of bronze and each had a name. One was called Jacin, which meant durability, and the other was called Boaz, which meant strength. Checking further, I turned in Kings 1, the 11th book of the Bible, to the 11th chapter, the 11th verse, and found these words. Therefore the Lord said unto Solomon, Forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded of thee, I will surely rend thy kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. All of these signs were clear to me. Somehow, in the unfathomable maze of time, human events were somehow mathematically entwined with numbers. With this in mind, I began a search through meditation and study to see if the answers to many unfurling world events could be tied in some way with the prophecies of old. What I uncovered was astounding to me, and I'm sure they will be astounding to you. I first found what many had known in ages past, that time, history, and future events were linked inescapably together. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras in 500 BC said, "The world is built upon the power of numbers." And Goethe, the German novelist, stated, "Coming events cast their shadow before." The Bible proclaims in Acts 2:17-18, "And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. And on my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days of my Spirit, and they shall prophesy." But before I proceed further, I want to issue a warning. What I discovered is profound and has terrible consequences for the future. Yet it could also evolve a bright new world. Therefore, I will preface my warning with the words of the great French novelist Victor Hugo, who said, "Every man has within him his own path. He is free to venture or not to venture upon that terrifying promontory of thought from which one can see into the shadows. If he refrains from doing so, he continues to live an ordinary life with ordinary thoughts, ordinary virtues, ordinary beliefs, and ordinary doubts. And it is well that he should. It is clearly best for his internal peace of mind. For if he ventures on to this summit, he is lost. He will have glimpsed the mighty waves of the marvelous, and no one can look upon that ocean with impunity. He persists in contemplating this alluring abyss, in exploring the unexplored, in remaining detached from life on the earth, and in his efforts to penetrate a forbidden world, to touch the untouchable, to gaze on the invisible. He returns again and again to the edge of the cliff, leans over, takes one step down, and then another. And that is how one penetrates the unknowable and loses oneself in a limitless extension of infinity. Thus, if you are ready to penetrate a forbidden world, we will step forward. Jesus' disciples came to him once on the Mount of Olives in private and asked him what would happen to show that it was coming of the end of the age. Jesus told them that when Egypt was compacted with armies, and there were wars and rumors of wars, and that there were earthquakes and famines in many places, and strange signs in the sky, then the time was drawing near. Jesus went on to say that these signs would precede but also herald the awful horrors described by the prophet Daniel. Jesus said the earth would undergo a terrible disaster, the likes of which had not happened before or would happen again. He said, however, that God would reduce the days of this disaster, for if he did not, then no one would survive. With these words, the greatest authority on the subject of humanity plainly stated that it was possible to discern the future, that future events could be foretold by observing certain signs and occurrences. In Revelation 13:18, there is a remarkable verse by St. John the Divine. It states, "This calls for wisdom. Whoever is intelligent can figure out the meaning of the number of the beast, because the number stands for a man's name. Its number is 666. This last ruler before the disasters can be known according to Revelation. The number of this man is 666. I will reveal 666 later, but first we need to go back to the bleak Portugal hills of Fatima on May 13, 1917. On this day, 3 small children, Lucy dos Santos, 10, and her cousin Francisco and Jacinta Marto, 9 and 11, saw a vision of the Virgin Mary. The vision appeared before the children a number of times, and the event electrified the whole of Portugal and eventually the world. The culmination of this startling occurrence was that the vision promised the children a miracle to help convince an unbelieving world. The miracle was promised for October the 13th, 1917. The event was to take place on the Cova de Era, a high plateau near Fatima. At the announced date, word had spread and some 70,000 people had gathered at the Cova de Era. It had been raining all morning, and at noon, the time when the miracle was promised, a hush fell upon the crowd, and the sky suddenly cleared, revealing the bright sun against a blue background. But the beautiful sun began to spin, giving off giant fiery links of light across the heavens. Then the sun began to plunge toward the earth. The thousands became terrified and dropped to the ground, beseeching God for mercy. The spinning, plunging, dancing sun miracle lasted for 10 minutes before it resumed its normal position back in the sky. As a result of the vision that the children saw and the miracle of the sun, Fatima has become a world-famed religious shrine where pilgrims the earth over come to pray, and many have claimed miraculous cures at the shrine. The vision had told the children that two of them, Francisco and Jacinto Marto, would die in a short time. Francisco died at age 11 and Jacinto at age 10. The third child became a nun, Sister Lucy, and she was also given a message containing a number of predictions. The vision told her that the message was to be given to the Bishop of Lisbon, and he was to keep them until 1960, when they were to be given to the Pope for revealing to the world. But in 1960, when the predictions were forwarded to the Pope by the Bishop of Lisbon, the Church refused to release the predictions to the world. This obviously brought about great speculation as to what the predictions contained. However, that is all that it has been, speculation, because the Church has been completely mute on the subject. The greatest speculation has centered around the predictions that the Church is in danger of falling and that Russia may take over the world. These speculations have been fueled by the hints that Sister Lucy has given over the years. She has repeatedly warned the Church that God is concerned with Russia and that the Church should do everything possible to return that country back to the Church. There are even more hardcore clues to the predictions. It is somewhat more than ironic that the Pope who occupied the Vatican at the moment the predictions were supposed to be revealed to the world turned out to be Pope John the 23rd. Pope John, as the world now knows, turned out to be the most innovative pope in centuries. He startled the world by convening the Second Vatican Council and by initiating contacts with the non-Catholic religions and with communists and atheists. It is in this regard that we come to our first clue as to the Fatima message. In early March 1963, the whole world was shocked when it was announced that Pope John had granted an audience to Alexei Zubay, the editor of the Soviet newspaper Izvestia, the then son-in-law of Nikita Khrushchev. Here again there was great speculation in the world press as to what these two men discussed. Of course, no one really knows. What we do know is that the meeting took place only a few months after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and that following that meeting between Alexei Zubay and Pope John, there has been a change in the Soviet Union which continues until this day. The second thing that can be noted, and also gives another clue to the predictions in Pope John. Prior to his being elected Pope, when he was Cardinal Roncalli, Pope John the 23rd stated before a huge audience at the Fatima Shrine, "I am not far from believing that when the mysteries of Fatima shall be completely revealed, there will appear in a clearer light the various small events, more mystical than the miracle of the sun, an inexhaustible source of graces and prodigies, which turn themselves in torrents upon Portugal, and from there spread out over the entire church and the world." This statement was made in 1956. The most significant Vatican note of current vintage was the startling announcement by Pope Paul VI on January the 11th, 1975, when he warned that the world had moved into a pre-war phase in which tension over energy supplies could erupt into conflict involving nuclear power. In the Bible, in Ezekiel 10:14, it reads, "And every one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, and the second face was the face of a man, and the third the face of a lion, and the fourth the face of an eagle. I have already stated in my previous recording, the UFO message, that Ezekiel was talking about a UFO and the beings that occupied them. But now with my further revelations, I want to clear up another ancient mystery, which will also certify the predictions that I will make later in this recording. What Ezekiel also described as a sphinx. I believe that the great Sphinx at Giza, Egypt, was erected as a timeless reminder of the strange and inscrutable destiny of man as linked with the universe. No intelligent historian or archaeologist will deny that they or anyone else really knows what the great Sphinx and pyramids are all about, or how or for what reason they were constructed. What they do know is that everything the Egyptians had or knew seems to have been there at the earliest known dates, including the entire system of writing. We know this because hieroglyphic signs on papyrus rolls have been found on monuments of the 12th dynasty. Later they were found in even more refined form on 4th dynasty monuments dating back to 2680 BC and even back to the times of Menes, the first Egyptian monarch of which there is any record. This recording began with a strange parallel between Solomon and the number 11 and the tragic events which have culminated when embodying that number. Now we need to draw another parallel. Solomon has been known throughout history as the possessor of great wisdom, and there is great mystery surrounding Solomon. One of Solomon's mysteries is his seal. Note, if you will, however, that the seal of Solomon is nothing less than the outline of two pyramids, one upside down against the other. Note also that there are 6 points to this seal. Remember also what I mentioned earlier regarding Revelation and the admonition of 666. Now I wish to repeat again what the philosopher Pelagius said in 500 BC. The world is built upon the power of numbers. Revelation states unequivocally that with wisdom and intelligence you can unlock the numeric code of history. Applying this logic and the wisdom that has been revealed to me, I believe that I have glimpsed the unlocking of this code. The pieces fall in place with such singularity of intent that no other answer seems reasonable. I have found a repeated code which is prevalent in all of the recent events which have staggered mankind. But even more important, by applying this code to the future, the implications are totally frightening.